the Cato Institute. Randal O'Toole of the Cato Institute originally wrote a white paper for the on policy analysis, getting what you paid for, paying for what you get, proposals for the next transportation reauthorization, which then, I'm holding these up for the camera for those of you who are watching, which then became his book, Gridlock, published by Cato, Why We're Stuck in Traffic and What We Can Do About It. The Cato Institute, of course, the libertarian think tank in Washington, D.C., and Randal O'Toole coming in by Skype today. So those of you watching our video stream can see him and say hi. Randal, welcome to the show. That doesn't sound... There's Randal. Oh, we don't have him yet. Okay, so we're getting to that. Randal's on his way in. So, but here's his general thesis is this idea of what is the commons and what isn't. Oh, here we have him. Okay, great. Randal, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, finally.
Great, yeah, great to have you with us. I was just introducing you in the Cato Institute, your book Gridlock, your new book Gridlock, and in this book, if I get this right, and I've spent some time with the book and a lot more time with the original white paper that you wrote, in this book, it seems that you're making the case for privatizing the commons of transportation. You know, in short form, hey, toll roads are a great thing. Let's have more of them.
Well, transportation is only a public good because we've decided to make it public. It's not technically has to be a public good or a commons. There's no reason why highways or railroads or airplanes or anything like that need government intervention. Actually, as a matter of historical curiosity, the railroads were private. People thought they were monopolies, so when it came time to start building roads for automobiles and trucks, they said, let's have the government provide them instead of let them be some kind of a monopoly.
Right, and it was tremendously successful. And the privatization of the railroads during the 1840s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and the massive government giveaways of land and materiel during the Civil War built the Jay Gould. I mix him up with the biologist, but the Gould fortune, the Samuel Huntington fortune. You know, the original robber barons were the railroad barons. And they got very rich, and they were in collusion in many cases with people like John Rockefeller refusing to carry oil for his competitors. It was one of the charges that Ohio brought against Rockefeller in the 1880s or 1890s rather. Why? First of all, how can you say that transportation is not part of the commons? I mean, I get it. My wife's grandmother, for example, lived on a 100-acre farm in Michigan her whole life, or most of her life. And they grew virtually everything they need. Every year she bought 2 dresses from Sears by catalog, and they had chickens and cows and horses and pigs and a farm, and she bought salt and sugar, and that was it. So you could argue that she didn't need to leave, but in this day and age, when most of us have to go out of our houses and use the public byways, whatever they may be, to get food, to get clothing, to get to work, to go to school, how could that not be part of the commons?
Well, we can debate the pluses and minuses of railroad monopolies and whether they were monopolies, but what's really significant is today we have so much government intervention in our transportation system that the whole system is breaking down. My argument is not that we have to privatize everything, but that government ought to act like a private provider. If government is going to provide the highways, it ought to make sure that the highways pay for themselves. If government is going to provide public transit, it ought to make sure that public transit pays for itself.
So you're advocating Marxism. You're suggesting that transportation is one of those parts of the means of production and supply, and that transportation should be owned by the government but be run like a business?
I'm not advocating that it be owned by the government. I'm saying if the government is going to do it, it should still be run like a business. Most of the benefits of transportation accrue to the people who use it. So why should I subsidize your highway? Why should you subsidize the trains I ride on? Why should I subsidize your airport?
Yeah, well, I got that from your. In fact, you say right here, nearly all of the benefits of passenger transportation go to the people who are being transported, so they should pay the cost. I would argue that, like education, for example, when we educate people, you could argue that an educated person is accruing, most of the benefit is accruing to them. I would say those society benefits tremendously by having an educated workforce. I would say similarly, society benefits tremendously by having people being able to be mobile. They can engage in commerce more effectively. They can get educated more effectively. They can participate in civil society more effectively. I disagree. I don't think that the primary benefit of transportation accrues to the transportee.
The problem with that argument is that you can make that argument with anything. Certainly, society benefits if everybody is well fed. So should government run all of our farms and all of our supermarkets and all of the delivery systems?
No, I'm not suggesting that. Food is not a natural monopoly. I can grow food in my backyard. But transportation is a natural monopoly.
It's not a natural monopoly. I can choose between air carriers. There's at least 10 different airlines. I can choose between highways. I can choose between rail lines. There's all kinds of different competitive transportation systems.
But it's a natural monopoly in as much as if I want to go from, for example, here Portland down to Salem, the capital city just south of here, about an hour and a half south of here, I could take a barge down the Willamette River. I could drive a car. I could take a train, and that's about it. So
there's buses. There's alternate train routes.
Sure,
there's
yeah,
alternate highway routes. You've already listed 3 routes.
Right,
so
but I'm saying that that defends my case that it's a natural monopoly, and therefore, because you can't just snap your fingers. There's not hundreds of different vendors that are going to get me from here to Salem, and therefore, what we should be doing as a society is saying what's going to be the most efficient, what's going to be the best for society collectively, and then fund that and make it work, like high-speed rail. I mean, you're opposed to high-speed rail. You think we should have more toll roads.
The problem with deciding from a central planning viewpoint is that there are so many breakdowns in how government works. You end up with special interests saying...
Then how does it work so well in Europe and not here?
It doesn't work in Europe. The average European rides high-speed rail only about 100 miles a year.
Well, not high-speed rail. I'm talking about all public transportation. Public transportation works great in Europe.
Again, that's a misnomer. The average American, we have rail transit in about 20 American cities, and the average American rides rail transit 88 miles a year.
Okay. Gridlock is the book. Randal O'Toole is the author. Randal, thanks for dropping by. Cato.org.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This whole issue of gridlock, our cities are congested, our roads are clogged up, we have pollution over the top, we're getting people who live near highways, their kids are more likely to have asthma and other diseases, we're creating cancers as a consequence of all of these conditions. It's nuts. It's just absolutely nuts. And public transportation is a great alternative to this, and you see this everywhere. I mean, the Northeast Corridor, as the Acela train came on and the faster train, more trains, better trains, more users. It's just that simple. The subways in New York, I was in New York a couple of weeks ago, the subways are just continuously packed. It's like people are using these things. Obviously, New York is perhaps the weird exception. It's rather hard to drive in New York, but the point is that anywhere in the country, as President Obama and the Democrats are suggesting that the stimulus package, part of the stimulus package should be public transportation, and that public transportation will be a good thing, that public transportation will grow things. As President Obama is doing this, you've got the libertarians and the Republicans and the corporations and basically kind of everybody else pushing back and saying, no, let's just keep the roads, let's keep the cars, let's keep the pollution, and I say no. This CSX points out how in one of their ads, just the efficiencies, for example, of rail transportation. Roll that.
Until we can move a ton of goods using no fuel, we've got the next best thing. CSX trains can move a ton of goods 423 miles on 1 gallon of fuel. CSX, how tomorrow moves.
1 ton of goods, 423 miles on 1 gallon of fuel. I mean, this isn't rocket science. Mass transportation makes sense. It's a general good. Okay. I think I've made my point on that, and I just wanted to. With regard to President Obama's speech last night, President Obama last night, talking before the Human Rights Campaign, is the first president of the United States ever to address a gay group, a gay rights group. Said basically, hang on, I'm going to do this, ending Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and ending discrimination against gays in the United States, in the U.S. military anyway. He didn't directly, as I recall, address gay marriage, but he did make it very clear that this is a civil rights issue. There's still many folks in the United States who are like, why is it taking so long? What's going on here? Here's why I think this is historic. And this is a really big deal, frankly. Here you have a man who, A, is president of the United States. So he has an enormous, when he speaks, people listen. He has an enormous bully pulpit. But for this issue, more importantly, he's a man of color, and his middle name is Hussein. There are only 300 and change million people in the United States, but we're going on 7 billion people on the planet. And several billion of those people, well over a billion, well over 1.5 billion of those people, are people of color who either have or have somebody in their family who has Hussein as part of their name. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. And in those cultures, in Asia and in Africa in particular, but also as a man whose skin is darker than a Northern European, you could be talking about cultures in South America too. Those cultures all tend to be very homophobic. I mean, here in America, Matthew Shepard was shocking in the violence and brutality with which this gay man was murdered and led to changes in laws and all kinds of things. It's routine in some other countries. In Saudi Arabia, they will chop off your head for being gay. I mean, you've got other countries in the world where it is perfectly legal for the government to murder gays, and is done routinely. And so, while I think it was, a fine thing that President Obama spoke before a gay rights group here in the United States about Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I think the really important thing that we all have to realize is that this was dramatic and historic on the stage of the world. Because all around the world there are little kids, young people in particular, teenagers, little kids, young adults, to whom Barack Obama is a rock star because he looks like them. He's got the same middle name that they do. His father came from their part of the world. You got kids all over the world who look to this guy as a role model, and this man is now standing up and saying, our gay brothers and sisters are our brothers and sisters. And that's no small thing. This is how cultures get transformed. This is how cultural memes begin. It's how they move across the world. And, this is just, to me, I think just an incredibly huge big deal. And nobody's, there's a lot of discussion in the American press and particularly in the progressive media, reading the blogs and things this morning. There's a lot of discussion about how, it's a noble thing that he did, and isn't it great that he came out and he talked to the historic, the first American to address an organized gay group and all that kind of thing. Isn't that great? But in our typical kind of Americo-centric, U.S.-centric way, we're dealing with this as if this was just the President of the United States talking about Don't Ask, Don't Tell, as if it was Bill Clinton or something. It's not. It's a man of color, a man whose middle name is Hussein, in front of the entire world, saying, gays are part of us. We are all together. This is a civil rights issue.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.